You're listening to Behind the Screens, presented by the Clear IT Partner Program from Mattson and Isom Technology Consulting. If you've ever wondered how confident, forward-thinking businesses make smart technology decisions while others fall behind, you're in the right place. Every episode, we pull back the curtain on the systems, tools, and leadership decisions that keep growing companies running strong, so you can apply them in your own business. Now, let's get into it with your hosts, Tyler Smith and Chris Harp.
Cybersecurity is less about the tools and more about the leadership mindset. So I guess let's, unpack that a little bit. Take me through what you mean by that.
Yeah, I feel like cybersecurity is one of those topics, like you said, that it can be scary. People hear stories, whether that's on the national news or from friends and family sometimes, where something's happened and it was horrible, right? It was a bad experience, and so there's this feeling that when it comes to cybersecurity, this is something to just be like, I'm afraid of it, I'm scared of it. And like anything, when you're afraid of something, the urge is to run away, right? To just try to ignore it, try to just not even think about it. And you and I talk all the time about, there's this mindset I think that a lot of small businesses have, that the right tool will solve this problem, right? Like I could buy a firewall, I could buy an antivirus tool or an EDR or some new fancy thing, and that will solve the problem. And there's this temptation as a leader to think of it as, here's a problem, I'm going to buy a tool, that tool is going to solve the problem, move on, don't think about it anymore. And I think one of the reasons why we always try to reframe that as a leadership mindset is cybersecurity has way more to do with your people and making sure they understand what the landscape looks like and what to do and what not to do than anything else. When it comes down to it, tools are part of the solution of keeping a business safe and working and efficient. But they're not the solution, right? It's just one part of many. So it's about framing that as a leader as a problem that requires ongoing discipline and training and knowledge, and not just buying a tool, slapping it in, and calling it good. It's way easier to just trick a human than it is to hack a firewall.
Yeah,
right?
Social engineering.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about, I feel like most leaders assume things are being handled, right? Like let's assume they're not always sure what handled means, though. So we can clarify that a little bit. When you talk specifically to business leaders, what's the most common assumptions that they make about cybersecurity?
We hear this all the time, and I twitch every time. No news is good news, right?
Yeah.
No news is good news. I've never been hacked before. My people have never done this thing, so that's good. And my counter to that is always no news is no news, right? It's the absence of this is not necessarily a good thing. It just means nothing's happened yet, or nobody's tried yet. And I feel like the important thing to reframe it around when we talk about how is it handled, whatever, it really comes down to training, getting your people the right basic understanding of the typical attacks that come through. I think everybody at this point has received maybe a phishing email, right? Something that says, hey, your password has expired and needs to be immediately reset, or there's suspicious activity on your account. Please click here to try to reset it and confirm that you are indeed okay. Creating that sense of urgency, that sense of, hey, you need to do this thing right now. The most important thing for small business leaders to think through is, the whole, is it handled, is it not handled, assumes kind of a binary state, like an on-off state to security. And security is never just on or off. It is multidimensional and the best and
wide
most
spectrum,
thorough.
right? I guess if you want to
exactly
label it.
The most thorough thing to do is to teach your employees how to recognize these threats and spot them and not do that, right? Not immediately react.
Yeah, and I know we focus a lot on education side of things, right? I'm a firm believer, we are a firm believer that you can't have too much education in that way. And the emails are getting good. You assume someone else is watching the door. Maybe nobody actually is, right?
Right.
What, you know, take me through the specifics or maybe the pitfalls of what happens when people assume that it's handled, right? That it's, I pay, an MSP, I pay my IT partner, I pay my IT department. I'm assuming it's handled.
Right. Yeah. I think that comes back to that same basic idea of, if you believe that cybersecurity is a tools problem and not a people problem, then you assume that it can be solved with tools, right? So that means, somebody's got it handled, meaning I'm paying someone else to put tools in place to keep this problem from happening, not I'm investing in my employees' understanding and knowledge to keep them safe proactively, right? And we constantly talk about this idea of being reactive versus proactive. And I think all leaders in small business have a basic sense that it is better to be proactive than reactive. If you are on your front foot and planning ahead and not making assumptions, but rather having a strategy, having an actual plan about, okay, this is how we're going to reduce the likelihood that one of our employees will be tricked by the bad guys, then you'll shift from that mindset of, I assume I've got this covered, to this is an ongoing thing that we need to invest in and make sure that we're doing consistently, because it also changes every quarter, every year. The strategies the bad guys use to try to get in through your people are always evolving. And like you said, getting better. So rather than assume that it's just handled, it basically, we advocate that shift in mindset to, this is something to be on the forefront of leaders' minds. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be this like, right, we're having this big, long, drawn-out conversation about security. It really is just simple training plans and behavior reinforcement, and creating this culture of cybersecurity in your organization that celebrates when somebody raises their hand and says, I think I got a fake email from you. And you go, yeah, you did. Good job. Yeah. Nice spotting of that, right? Like making sure that you're celebrating those wins and shifting from that like back burner assumption mindset to instead, proactive strategic plan for actually handling this ahead of time.
You do need a little bit of visibility, right? So walk me through what exactly that means, because cyber clarity, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, if we could label it, I guess it's called cyber clarity. You don't need to know the details, but take me through with that cyber clarity, the definition of that means. What does that mean? Yeah.
So first off, it's understanding what the real problem is. So if you look at most people's vision or understanding of cybersecurity, it's a big, dark, scary thing that's coming at you. And while I would say that can be true, it's being clear about what your business can do to keep your data and your people safe is all about having a plan, having a training schedule for people that just says, here's how we're going to prepare in advance for these attacks that are going to come.
At the business level, not at the technical level, at the business level you're talking.
So that people, as a part of their annual reviews, if you have training of any kind in whatever business you're in, make sure that a part of that is basic behavior training on how to recognize cyber threats that are coming at your employees. Because I guarantee you they're coming at them all day, every day.
Sure.
They're coming through text messages. They're coming through more and more through deep fake phone calls. They're coming through emails. That's the far and away right now the most common way. They're coming through social media. They're even coming through Google searches. People going on the internet, typing in a search and having the top 5 search results be fake.
Yeah.
Teaching your team how to recognize what those cyber threats are is the first step in cyber clarity. It's being proactive. It's being on your front foot and not waiting for an incident to occur before you recognize that you need to take action, but rather knowing that this is just an ongoing thing. This is a discipline. This is part of being a business in the modern age. If people use electronic devices that are connected to the internet, you need this in your strategy. Most people have that assumption that, okay, oh man, I got to send my people away to training. That's going to be really disruptive. That's expensive. That means they're not doing their job for, a day or two, and they're traveling to some, place to actually do this thing. Maybe have to stay overnight. Like that's kind of the old way, right? Where it's all in person and it's extensive. Most of these training platforms now offer very small, focused 2 to 5 minute trainings that are very specific. Like, here's how to spot a phishing email. Here's how to spot a phishing text. Here's how to behave when you get an inbound phone call that says it's from somebody and you feel like maybe it isn't. All of those things now are in these platforms that are 2 to 5 minutes. And so you absolutely can just apply this in microdoses throughout the day and get your people trained up on how to recognize it without sending them away to a half-day training or a full-day training or something like that that's very disruptive. Don't wait until your employees are, a year on the job before you tell them, hey, if you get a text message, quote unquote, from the quote unquote CEO, maybe you should be suspicious of that. Do that as a part of onboarding. Do that as a part of the offer letter acceptance process. We never ask anybody for these kinds of things. And it feels maybe a little bit peculiar, like we're a small business. What? No, that's never going to happen to us. And I think you said it earlier. You are the most likely target for this kind of thing because the bad guys specifically try to target small businesses because they know the processes are usually not as well built out. In an enterprise company at scale, they have very detailed processes and tools and teams to handle this stuff. So small businesses are more likely the target of this kind of behavior and activity than the large ones.
Yeah, the larger ones are most likely are putting forward a full-fledged investment. They have a strategy, a defined business continuity plan. They're putting forth a concerted effort in this area. Their attack vector is a lot larger. The smaller businesses, to your point, maybe don't have that. I mean, we work with a lot of businesses that do, which is great, but maybe they don't have that. And so while they are a smaller attack vector, if you can get 5 of those, 5 50-person offices is better than targeting, 1 250 person.
This happens. It happens all the time. Don't be afraid of it. Don't put your head in the ground and try to just hope that it doesn't happen, but rather plan for it and give your people, including the newest employees, the tools, the simple tools in behavior modification to actually handle that and not think twice. Cyber clarity at the end of the day means you are prepared, you have a plan, and you've trained your people, and also you have tools, right? But way more about the preparation and the planning and the training side of things than the tool side of things.
Absolutely.
This episode of Behind the Screens is brought to you by the Clear IT Partner Program from Mattson and Isom Technology Consulting. If you've ever had that sinking feeling that your tech just isn't doing what it's supposed to, you're not alone. Maybe it's the constant tickets, maybe it's the security risks, or maybe you just don't know what you're paying for half the time. That's where Clear IT comes in. We built it for leaders who want to stop firefighting and start planning. With the Clear IT Partner Program, you get a dedicated team, real strategy, and systems that just work. No more waiting, no more guessing. Imagine your IT actually helping your team get more done and your business feeling more in control. That's the whole point. Want to see how it would work for your business? Schedule a free consultation today at mitcs.com/hello.
Now, back to the show.
All right, so a lot of leaders genuinely trust their IT providers or their IT team, right? Their internal IT team. But that trust can sometimes turn into distance, right? Maybe they have it, we go to the assumption side of it,
Right.
How do they stay engaged without micromanaging? Another way of phrasing that is, what's the difference between trusting your IT partner and abandoning responsibility?
Yeah, I think this is a great topic because You see it all the time, especially in areas like IT and technology where there's a lot of complexity. There are a lot of tools, there are a lot of acronyms that get thrown around. And when it comes down to it, having this kind of basic understanding of accountability around cybersecurity is really important. So what does that mean, right? And we talked a lot about training already, but accountability around training, it means having a tool that actually tells you or reporting on maybe a monthly basis that says, how many of my staff are actually taking this training? How many are completing it? If you have testing tools in place where you're literally sending out emails trying to see if your employees are more likely to click on fraudulent links, then you're reviewing those reports, right? You're shifting from, okay, we have a plan, we're on our front foot, we're proactive, so we're getting out of assumption land, and now we have a plan. Security only works if you actually hold that plan accountable in some way. And so one thing to ask of your internal IT or your IT partner is, what can we do on a regular basis to confirm that this plan is actually happening? And like I said, it can be as simple as monthly reports that just show, okay, yeah, I have 25 employees, 35 employees, and of those 35 people, 80% of them are taking the cybersecurity training and passing it. Just doing the basic, simple. Yes, they watched it. And maybe those people who didn't yet take it, we're following up with them. Hey, need to make sure you do this. Maybe that's something that you can delegate to the tool and you only check on it quarterly or something. But cybersecurity is all about diligence and making sure that these things are actually happening. So moving from assumptions to accountability is all about having some basic things to measure. Is the plan working? Because if you put a plan in place and nobody actually does it, and you get compromised because the person that fell for that one phishing email was one of the only people in the organization that literally didn't take the training, then that becomes the Achilles heel, right, of your strategies. Because if you just put the plan in place and you never actually ask, are we doing it, then there's too much gray area.
So how do you balance that then? Because one could make an argument to say, like, okay, how do you avoid micromanaging on that, right? Like, that's a hard, you want to be involved, you want to know the details, you want to understand it, you don't need to dive into the tool set or anything like that, but you got to find a way to balance that out without jumping in and trying to micromanage something. And
it's a spectrum. So I think, we talked a little bit earlier about the idea that cybersecurity is not a light switch. It's not either on or off. It's a continuum. And if you're going from zero strategy and zero training to a strategy that includes training and making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, I tend to want to measure success on how far have we come, right? So not did we reach 100%, which is the light switch model, right? Like we're 100% protected because every single employee has taken every single training we've asked them to. But if you can go from nobody has taken any training to 75% of the staff have taken training, you've already dramatically reduced your risk profile in the world of cybersecurity. Now, the other important thing to know is there is no such thing as eliminating your risk profile, short of literally disconnecting from the internet and going back to just paper and abacus or something as your tool set. There's always some level of risk, but it's important to understand that it's a continuum of risk. And it goes from we've got no plan and we're just hoping that nothing happens. Hope is not a strategy. To we are very diligent and we make sure every single person in our organization does everything all the time. The reality is, as a small business, you're probably not going to get to the 100% mark. It's probably just not going to happen. But it's also not a bad idea at all to get from 0% to 50%, right? If you can get half of your staff effectively trained on this, you're cutting your risk in half. You're not eliminating it, but you're significantly reducing it.
That can be complex, right? I mean, even just the dynamic in itself can be complex, and I think most executives, I think we we really gravitate towards clarity over anything, try and avoid complexity, because if you can clarify
Getting stuck
something
in the weeds, right?
Yeah, if you clarify something, you can measure it, right? Complex things are challenging to measure, so until you can clarify it, you can't measure it. So, what's your idea on, how leaders can create visibility without, you mentioned get stuck in the weeds, without getting stuck in the weeds, without the micromanagement, without operating here while you can still maintain your high-level perspective on things, but you still want to create that visibility at multiple levels?
Yeah, I think it comes down to helping people understand what the problem is.
Yep.
And that's what any good leader does
sure.
to start with, right? You can't, or you shouldn't have a strategy unless you have clarity on what the problems are and what the vision is. Right? What do you do as an organization? What's keeping you from getting that thing done? And if you establish the problem as there's just a bunch of bad people out there and we don't have good enough tech to keep them out, that's a different problem than our employees are being targeted every day to be tricked into giving away data. And if you frame the problem well as a leader, then you can help people buy into the strategy of solving that problem. And so, the stuck in the weeds part usually is the first scenario of, our tools aren't good enough, so we're going to deploy a new EDR, we're going to have a whole new system, and, we got to do this and that and the other thing, and there's all these little steps involved, and then people's eyes kind of glaze over and they're like, oh, great, more stuff, more tech.
More money to spend on the tool.
Right.
That's,
and so you don't want to get mired in that if at all possible. You want to focus first on the principal problem, which is people getting targeted and tricked. But then it starts to lead you into like, okay, well, what happens if someone does click on the link? What happens if someone does put their username and password or their email and password into that fraudulent website that then steals their credentials? What do we do then, right? That next stage of planning is really important because that can actually help how you address those things when they happen. And I do say when and not if, because even if you have, like we said before, 75% of your people are trained, that 25% just, they can never quite get that training done. They're super busy. They're already working 50-hour weeks. This is one more thing, I'll get to it eventually. And then surprise, they're the ones that get compromised, right? Having an actual business continuity plan and then thinking ahead about, okay, what if this happens? Or what if this happens and when this happens? How do we do that? I think that's a good conversation to have proactively with your provider as well.
Yeah, and I think what if scenarios are challenging in it of itself because you could what if all day long, but at least you're having the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so we do strategic planning meetings. We work with a lot of businesses. When we're having these conversations, or you're maybe at an event with other business leaders, what surprises people when these what if scenarios come up? What is the thing that really is like, I never thought of that or anything? What do those surprises look like?
I feel like there's two answers to this question. One is the like outlandish, super rare, weird, clever scenarios that are like, man, that'll never happen twice. And those are fun stories to tell, right? And they do happen. But I think what surprises people most about these conversations is just how simple most of these attacks are. They're not super sophisticated, like nation state compromising somebody's phone in their pocket, which then infects the refrigerator, which then bounces over to the security camera, which then gets into a email account of a vendor, which then emails. It's like, that doesn't happen very often. Now, if you're like the Department of Defense or somebody with, $1 billion in literally one account somewhere, maybe that'll happen to you. But I think most people are surprised by just how simple most of these attacks are. It's that text message. Hey, I've got something for you to do. Can you respond and let me know? That evolves into eventually giving away some kind of
the social engineering.
The simple human to human or sometimes bot to human ways of tricking people. I think that's most surprising to people because people watch movies, right? They see all these clever things and like George Clooney, typing in a really complex password and immediately bypassing all the systems. And it's like, wow, that's really clever. And I think most people are just surprised that the vast majority of these attacks are the opposite of clever. They're super simple, and they just rely on good people who trust being tricked through urgency.
Yeah, through urgency is a huge one because I think that's the prey mentality is this has to happen right here, right now. Well, let me go and ask so-and-so. No, it's got to happen right now, you know, and preying on that urgency. Because if there's a sense of urgency from a business leader, from a CEO, from a CFO, from a COO.
Inspires action.
It inspires action.
Quick action. Do it now.
Yeah, I don't want to let them down. As part of a leadership rhythm, specifically a leadership rhythm, right? How often should business leaders be having these conversations?
So at minimum annually, right? When you get to the business continuity, the high level business planning, you should be with your leadership team, sitting down on at least an annual basis. Try to maybe align it with your business plan, right? If you're doing an annual budget, if you're kind of laying out what the next year is going to look like, part of that conversation should be around business continuity, cybersecurity. What are we doing to improve this? Because at the end of the day, a lot of this is a risk conversation. So the way most small businesses deal with risk is they buy insurance, right? They go out to a marketplace of third parties that say, here, if you pay us X amount per month, we will insure you up to this amount of risk. And so I think most people at this point have a cyber insurance policy through their insurance provider, and they believe that checks the box. And what we always advocate is, at least on an annual basis, review that. Do you even know what your cyber insurance plan covers? Do you know what it requires? Have you ever done the due diligence to just review that in a business level, not a technical or a super deep dive, but just, do you know what it actually even covers and whether or not it will pay if you haven't done certain things like implement an employee training program? So that's annual. On a quarterly basis, I think you need to be reviewing with your internal IT team or your partner to say, what have we done in the last quarter? What do we have coming up? What's our training
to get towards that 90%?
To get that accountability plan in place. So you can create the plan on an annual basis, but you do need to look at it quarterly to say, are we doing what we thought we would do? Do we have tools that can tell us, if we have 35 employees, how many of them have actually taken the training we told everybody to take in the kickoff meeting for the year? Is it 2%? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it all of them? So quarterly, there should be that accountability rhythm. How are we doing along that plan? And then on a monthly basis, there should be the real, the little bit more dialed in portion, which is just the touch point. Are we doing those? How are we on that quarterly progress?
Sure. So
annual, quarterly, monthly. If there's no plan and you're going from nothing to something, then it might take a little bit more attention than just once a year. But once you've gotten some outlines of a plan in place that says, what will we do if our internet connection goes down? How will my staff continue to work? Very much depends on your industry.
So you have the business plan, then you have an incident response plan. And I do believe on a lot of cybersecurity insurance forms, we do see, do you have a business continuity plan?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Do you have an incident response plan? Because that's the what if scenario.
Yeah. When's the last time you tested this plan, right? Like these are questions that are asked because they're important questions. And they define, I always tell people, pay very close attention to what that cyber insurance questionnaire is, because every question on that form is there for a reason. And it's because it helps them understand, how big of a risk are you to insure? If you answer no to too many questions on that form, one, you probably won't get a policy. Two, if you do get a policy, it'll be a lot more expensive. And three, you really should stop and think, why am I answering no to every one of these questions that an expert third party is asking about my risk profile?
Right.
That should tell you something, that your risk is higher than it should be, and that there should be a plan to address it. Because look, like at the end of the day, the job of a leader in a small business is to define the why, right? To define the vision of the organization and why are we here? Why do we do what we do? They can partner with a team that defines the how, right? Like that can be your internal IT, that can be a third-party partner. But where businesses are successful in preventing these cyber attacks is when the leaders establish why are we doing this? Why do we have a business continuity plan? Why are we doing the training? And then a partner says, here's how we're implementing those things, and here's what it looks like, and here's how accountable we can hold everybody. When those two things stay connected, your risk drops dramatically, right?
Sure.
You just end up going to, okay, now we have an organization that is much more resilient and ready to withstand the attacks than the one down the street that hasn't clarified the why or the how.
Sure. We have the proactive measure over here. We have the reactive measure here in the event of something happening.
And if all you have is the how, by the way, that's a problem too,
right?
Because no one will do it, right?
Sure.
If you haven't clarified the why and inspired people to take action, the how matters a lot less.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so fear can get quick compliance, right? When we're talking about that, but it rarely builds long-term accountability. Why would you say that fear is one of the worst motivators for cybersecurity?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time, and we hear this from people, like this idea that the best way to motivate quick action on cybersecurity is to scare people, right? And I think you put it perfectly just now. Like, it's a great short-term strategy, right? We've seen this over and over again and throughout everything. Like, if you can make people afraid, you can inspire quick action. But people get numb very fast to fear. And the way that most people deal with fear in long term is they just start ignoring it, right? They're just like, oh man, yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Didn't you say last week that all of my data could be compromised and my kids' photos could be stolen from me? And like, man, I've heard this story before. Like, no, I'm just going to shut off, right? And so if the way you try to build a culture of cybersecurity in your organization is through trying to scare people, then basically that works exactly once, and then never again, because people are like, well, I was scared and then it didn't happen, and so all of that fear and anxiety was wasted.
No, I would agree that fear, probably one of the worst motivators of cybersecurity. It's a single point of failure.
Yeah.
Like you said, as soon as it doesn't happen, you prepare for it. As soon as it doesn't happen, it's like, well,
and I would say the worst part about it is exactly the tactic used by the bad guys, right? They're trying to motivate quick action through fear, and its cousin, anxiety, right? Like, it's maybe you're not directly afraid, but you're worried, and that kind of way of motivating action is exactly what the bad guys use in the phishing tactics that are the primary method of attacking people. So, like, whatever you do as an organization, as a leader in a small business, like, don't lead with fear, because again, that's a one-shot strategy, and you're actually kind of indirectly reinforcing the tactic of the bad guys by saying, be afraid, be very afraid, do this action. And then you're basically training people to do the same thing with incoming emails. So don't use fear. I think people need to understand the stakes. So they need to understand generally that the why,
Yep.
Hey, the reason we're having these conversations, the reason we're taking this training, the reason we're celebrating it when somebody raises their hand and says, hey, I think I just got a malicious email. Maybe I'll forward this to our IT partner to analyze instead of just clicking on it. Celebrating those things as what you want. The behavior that you expect in the organization is to have people that are cautious and mindful and careful when it comes to, incoming messages that drive that sense of fear.
This is a hard line to walk as a business leader because it's scary. Mm-hmm. It really is. We talk about, see things from Ocean's 11 to, any other movie, right? It's scary. So it is fearful, but you don't want to lead.
Don't lead with fear.
With fear.
because one, it drives numbness over time. And the more something doesn't happen, using that fear drum means that people just get numb to it and they just stop listening. They're like, you know what? You tried to scare me before, it didn't happen, and here we are again, so I'm just not going to listen anymore. So creating that culture of cybersecurity where you're saying, hey, the stakes are high. We need to do this as an organization so that we can achieve our mission. As a business, as an organization, as a nonprofit, whoever you are, you have a mission. And cybersecurity is one of those things that is a risk that can derail your mission. The worst ones are the ones that can actually completely interrupt or take away your mission, right? By some very public compromise. And so there's absolutely an undercurrent of fear in this. But if people as leaders and organizations can convert that into motivated, ongoing action, then it's much more useful.
Yeah, I think one of the ways, that we've been successful in having these conversations in our organization is we frame it as an investment. Mm-hmm. Like we are investing in our security posture. We are investing in not so much the tool set, but right. the frame, the mindset of it, And so I love the idea of security should be part of how people work, not something, I got to add that into my mind. This is just one more thing I got to think of, and I think leaders can help instill that without the fear side of it. Yeah. And so I like the idea of it's more of part of how people work. From your perspective, how can leaders create that culture? We talked about culture, and how we frame it, is very much an investment. How can leaders create a culture where people speak up, they learn something, then they take ownership of something?
It starts with establishing the vision. It starts with, as you said, incorporating it into what people learn and how they do their job, not as a bolt-on, like a side thing, do all of this and also, by the way, take this thing, right? But rather front and center. This is a part of how we do what we do and how we stay safe and how we manage risk and how we achieve our overall goal, our mission as an organization. So making sure that is discussed, that it's brought up at company meetings, making sure that, like we said before, that you are celebrating when people speak up, right? When somebody gets that targeted text message or that email that looks really, really convincing, or they're out on Google search and they see, a website that says like, hey, download the Zoom client today, and they look at it and they just say, there's just something a little bit off about this. And then they pause, they reflect, and then they involve an expert like an IT resource to help them reassure either that it's valid or invalid. Celebrating those things is part of what helps build culture. And if you always treat cybersecurity as something that's just, we have to do this,
and
take the training, I'm so sorry. If you as a leader are approaching it as a like, I'm apologizing for this extra work I'm giving you, then you're automatically framing it as something that isn't important, that they just have to do. It's not something that they need to do.
Not a priority.
Not a priority, yeah. If you instead say, hey, like, I understand this is some additional work, but this is really important and here's why. Sometimes involving some personal stories, or saying like, talking about the stakes and understanding like, we as an organization with our mission, especially when it's like nonprofits, we help this number of people every day. If you have those stats of those numbers, so an outage or downtime or compromise means that like that would prevent us from being able to help a dozen people, right? Like understanding the stakes in a way that is not just cataclysmic, like, the world is ending, but tying it to actual business outcomes is part of how you build that culture. And I think the best advice that we give people is just building it in, baking it in to your overall organization. This is how we do what we do, and it is important, and it does add a layer of security and reduce our risk, which is how we better achieve our mission.
Sure. And so you're talking about like, baking this in, just this is just part of our everyday, right? Mm-hmm. So how are the cybersecurity criminals baking in AI into, what these type of, attacks, and how are they leveraging it?
That's a good question because, I would say even just 3 years ago, maybe even just 2 years ago, one of the main strategies for teaching people how to spot fraudulent email, spot fraudulent communication in general, was to look for simple things like misspellings or grammatical issues or any kind of a sign that might tell you that whoever is sending you this might not be a native English speaker. That was like one of the top 5 tactics for spotting phishing and fraudulent communication. With AI and the advent of large language models, meaning you don't have to be a native English speaker to generate absolutely perfect text, means that's off the table. That's really less and less is that a strategy to recognize, my boss doesn't typically speak in fragments with commas, with spaces between them and a period. It's kind of at the middle of a sentence that doesn't make sense. They can actually build AI models that make that more and more and more convincing. So at the end of the day, it's about training more and understanding that this is somewhat of an arms race with AI, where the bad guys are getting better at creating more and more and more convincing fraudulent email and text, and your IT teams are hopefully getting better at implementing better and better and better tools to recognize and keep those things from even getting to you. But at the end of the day, it's training. It's seeing examples of these things so that people can understand any email that you get that tries to compel quick action out of you through a sense of urgency should be looked at more than once and should be carefully evaluated for authenticity.
Yeah, and I think, training, historically has always felt kind of like a checkbox. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, checkbox, we talked a little bit about culture before, and creating a culture where people, speak up. You had mentioned you want to celebrate that, mm-hmm. those kind of items. How do you make training relevant? How do you bake that in? I mean, you can't just show up and start announcing like, hey, this is our new, this is what we're doing. You got to bake that in. You got to make that relevant. How do you do that? What's the approach to that?
And this is where, we've said tools. We're less about the tools, more about the process, more about the mindset. This is a place I feel like where the right training tool does make a difference, because you want training materials that are relevant and that demonstrate the kinds of things that people need to look for in a way that's accessible. If it's super dry and dull and, it's like watching paint dry is the level of engagement that you're expecting out of this content, then even if people watch the material, they may not actually internalize it, right? So I feel like you do need a training platform tool partner that does create modern, relevant, and compelling content for your employees to consume, and also that it's, we mentioned this earlier, but it's short enough to be consumed in one sitting, right? Like, or a series of sittings where you're just doing 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, not sitting down and doing an hour-long training on cybersecurity, or 4-hour-long training. But trying to make it short, practical, and at the end of the day, help empower them to feel like they have tools to recognize this kind of fraud, this kind of attack, where before it might have just been some big abstract concept like, don't let the bad guys in, Right. Okay.
All right, lock the door.
Then, I'll lock the door, exactly. I'll watch the door and make sure nobody comes through. But just having a series of trainings that are kind of just focused on getting practical strategies to your employees to be able to recognize and identify what these threats look like, so that ideally they don't fall for them.
Yeah, and I think the term that you used a couple of times is the effective, right? It's got to be training that is effective, not overwhelming. Right. We've all been to trainings that are overwhelming. It's like,
or they're all fear, right?
Yep.
This $10 million was stolen from this company, and this person lost their job, and this company had to close, and you're just sitting there through the training, wide eyes, like, oh wow, that sounds awful.
I'm closing all my bank accounts.
I want to just go home and not touch a computer ever again, But that's not effective, I feel like. Maybe that helps set the stakes so you understand why it's important, but if the training program you subscribe to is fear-based, long-term, that's just not going to work.
Yeah, and as business leaders, I think tone matters.
Yeah.
I think the overall tone matters. You had mentioned the phrasing things. I had mentioned, the phrasing of an investment, right? We're investing, we're doubling down on what we're doing. Tone matters, and how leaders talk about security. I believe that shapes how people react.
Yes.
Right? How you frame it, how the tone comes across, that shapes how people will react to it, how they will respond to it, how they will engage with it. Because engagement's a huge thing with security, and you had talked about effective training. You want that training to be effective, but you want them to be engaged in it, really truly learning it. Are we learning it for the moment, or do we truly understand it, the core of it? And I think that tying it back to earlier conversations is clarifying, what's our goal, what's our vision, what's the problem that we're solving, all the way down to people engaging in those trainings.
Yes. Yeah. And remember, it's a continuum. So you want to go from, if you have nothing now, from nothing to the beginnings of something, and then measure it and look at it over time to judge progress and set a goal. All good leadership sets goals. We want to have X amount of this training under our belts and people aware by, Q2 of 2026 or, sometime in the next 6 months. And basically set that out and then measure it over time, because it won't be that you implement a new training platform and assign everybody a course and everybody takes the training and, remember, get back to this light switch metaphor. Now we're secure, right? No, it's an ongoing process. It's a continuum, and it's about reducing risk as an organization intentionally and over time, rather than trying to buy a magic bullet that solves this problem for you.
As business leaders, we have an obligation to to our employees to help them through that. Right? It's not to set the tone out of fear. It's to drive the clarity. Go back to what that problem is that we're trying to solve. What are we trying to get ahead of, and plan for it, and then what do we do in the event of something happening?
Right.
And so I think tone sets the stage for really all of it.
Yeah.
To your point of what you were saying.
Absolutely.
So if we leave our listeners with one thing today, it's that cybersecurity, frankly, isn't a department, right? It's not a team. It's not kind of essentially a label anyways. It's a decision that you make every day as a leader, setting that tone, driving that clarity. What problem are we solving?
Yeah. I mean, you do not want to have this as something that's just set off to the side, right? That, again, is a light switch. We just need to buy a newer, better tool and this problem will be solved for us. You have to own the plan. You have to think of this in the same way that you think of a business plan. How do you manage risk as an organization overall? Cybersecurity is a part of that strategy. And so it should involve basically everybody in the organization. As you grow and mature and get better at this, it should involve your vendor partners. It should involve the people that you interact with. But ultimately, you have to look at this strategically, because hope is not going to protect you, right? Creating clarity and creating a plan that specifically tries to move from wherever you are to further along that trail of being more protected by making sure your people know what to look for. That's what's going to protect you. That's what's going to lower your risk. That's what's going to help you do whatever it is you do better and with less risk than just crossing your fingers and hoping that you won't get attacked. Thanks for listening to Behind the Screens. If you're ready to take the guesswork out of technology and lead with greater clarity, we'd love to help you build a plan that works. Visit mitcs.com/hello to take the next step. And we'll see you next time.